Hello.
Oh, fancy meeting you here.
Weirdest thing. I was scrolling around and bam, there you are. Wonder how that happens. Ooh. How you doing?
Wonderful.
Very, very nice. Me too.
Good.
Me too, wonderful. But what a busy morning. Since 4 a.m., if you can believe that. It's craziness. I'm so in that habit now. I can't sleep past not even to 4:01. How about that? So anyway, we have questions, and I'm going to get straight to them. Okie dokie, Dr. Rosensweet. My first question came in saying, Dr. Rosensweet, can you please explain why it is when we are told we need to, oh dear, well, anyway, this was the second question for you. I'm putting it first. Or looking to get to our optimal doses with hormones, we are never given an actual number of what optimal is. And this seems to happen mainly with estrogen. And I remember this well. I was trying to find optimal numbers. Somebody give me a number, and I never got a number. And can you explain that a little bit?
Yes.
Thank you. And good morning, Diane.
The reason that's hard to come by is that with one exception, one important exception, the numbers don't exist that I'm aware of. However, so you look at blood tests and you see these wide ranges, sometimes based on youthful ranges, and they're so wide that they're not really useful.
Got it.
Menopausal ranges, the menopausal ranges that they report are women who not get on hormones, so they're close to nil. However, gosh, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I wanted to know what the numbers were. And I dived into the medical literature, and I was to find studies that defined, let's just take estrogen, for example.
Okay.
What constitutes too little estrogen and what constitutes too much? That would define optimal range. Too little, we don't want too little, we don't want too much.
Right.
And there's very good studies that I found, and I was able to extrapolate the data and correlate it with the 24-hour urine hormone test.
Yes.
The lab that we use. So that the lab we use was so felt so right about what I had done that they have an extra line in the estrogen column, for example, that shows optimal level for women being treated in menopause. And we have that posted on every single laboratory report. Let me define optimal for estrogen, for example. The too little can easily be defined by, if you don't have enough estrogen, you're not going to have vaginal protection of the vagina, and it's going to atrophy. And that is a dire consequence over time. And it leads to irritating the bladder, and it can lead to incontinence. It can lead to chronic bladder infections. We for sure want to have enough estrogen to support the health of the vagina. And we have that number defined. In fact, this won't be meaningful to anybody, but if you go below 8 micrograms of the sum of estradiol and estrone on a 24-hour urine hormone test, that vagina will not be protected. And
it's an interesting optimal number.
Yeah. And there's another optimal number that's definable and extractable from the medical literature is, what does it take to protect the bones? If you drop below 8 micrograms of of estrone and estradiol, the sum per 24 hours, you're most likely going to get bone loss. Whereas if you get above, in most circumstances, you're going to be protecting those bones. Oh, isn't that interesting? The level for the vagina and the level for the bones is identical. Now, let's talk about the upper limit.
Okay.
Young women vary in the amount of estrogen that they need. At the low end here, there's some women who just don't need the same high amount of estrogen to menstruate every month. You need a certain amount of estrogen to produce an endometrial lining to menstruate, and it varies woman to woman. In fact, there's a rather wide range. And interesting enough, every single cycle, and I mentioned this before,
Mm-hmm.
a woman is in preparation for getting pregnant. And the wildest thing is, she's also in preparation for breastfeeding every single cycle.
Right.
So there's robust estrogen levels, and those robust estrogen levels are what guides the breasts. And what a woman has, and she can feel it during a cycle, that her breasts get fuller. And one of the ways that they're fuller is she's actually added new breast glandular cells in preparation for possible breastfeeding and implantation. And how did those new cells get there? They get there by cell division of the current cells. You get cellular mitosis, and this happens every single month. And if she doesn't get pregnant, those cells disappear. And if she does get pregnant, she gets more breast glandular cell proliferation, ultimately to prepare fully for breastfeeding. Wow, what kind of stuff is that about? One thing, so if this is the range, because some young women have much higher levels of estrogen, other young women have lower levels of estrogen. Now let me try and illustrate how much a menopausal woman needs.
Right, there it goes.
Not need that monthly breast glandular cell mitosis and proliferation. Not at the age of 50, not with the current state of the immune systems on the planet Earth. No, that's a very vulnerable moment. So I assert that best medicine is don't proliferate breast glandular cells, yet have enough to protect the vagina and the bones. And in most instances, that's sufficient to protect the arteries, as shown. And in many instances, it's enough to protect the brain. Now, in some instances, there is this exception. There are some women who have such cognitive challenge, and even towards the direction of dementia, that will get more robust on our estrogen dosages. This is uncommon, but we definitely do it.
Right.
So these limits for estrogen, the lower and the upper, are clearly defined for a menopausal woman on the 24-hour urine hormone test report that we do. And other labs could pick this up. There's another excellent 24-hour urine hormone lab. And I look forward to the day when my dear friend also publishes this on his lab reports.
Very nice. So
optimal is somewhere in that zone.
Okay, somewhere in that zone.
Somewhere it's definitely enough to protect the vagina and the bones, minimal. That'll give you a lot of the other benefits, and not too much that you create breast glandular cell proliferation, except in exceptions.
Right. So when, I think that what happens, and I know this was for me, I was looking for a number, like, tell me what number I need to get. Do I need to get to 100? Do I need to get to 110? Do I need to get to 120? Then I was reading.
You need to stay on a 24-hour urine hormone test from a specific lab. When you add up the estradiol, and you add up the estrone, the two most potent estrogens, you need to be above 8 and below 14. And at times we will go higher than 14, but in those instances, we're very, very rigorous about breast health and evaluating breast health through mammograms, through thermography. And also we monitor the uterine lining, because as you get into those more robust levels, about 14 micrograms per 24 hours, count them, look at your urine and see if you can count 14 micrograms.
Just this morning I did that.
You did.
No.
I'm kidding, of course. You can't look at your urine and count the amount of estradiol.
No. I understand it now, and I understand the other side too. It made no sense. It does now, but yeah. So yeah, thank you for offering that, and I love this, and I love this, and I love trying to do this when you're doing it backwards. It's a little weird, but I do understand.
There's a few more things I'd like to say.
Please.
it's a common clinical practice that when a woman has symptoms of estrogen insufficiency, like hot flashes, to start low on dosage, gradually increase the dosage until her hot flashes go away. And of course, she could have many other symptoms. So really optimal is she eliminates all those symptoms of estrogen insufficiency while not slipping into symptoms of estrogen excess.
Yes.
Now, clinically, that would define an optimal zone. Get enough estrogen so that you don't have symptoms of insufficiency, and at the same time, you don't have any symptoms of estrogen excess. That would be an optimal clinical. And so many people are using that method. And the North American Menopause Society and the American College of Gynecologists says don't test. There's reasons why they say that, primarily because they don't understand the 24-hour urine hormone test, but they're right about blood testing and they're right about saliva testing. They say just go by clinical symptoms alone. Well, I personally did a study of 51 of my patients, all of whom we did 24-hour urine hormone tests on, that said to me, I feel good. I found my right dose. And 50% of those women were not on sufficient estrogen to protect their vagina and their bones.
Right.
And 25% were on dosages that were excessive, in my opinion, that put them at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation. That's 75% of the women who said, I'm good. That clinical titration was not enough. You got to take that final step of testing. And usually all we have to do is tiny tweaks to get them in that zone by the time they're feeling good. But we want them in the zone. You do not want to lose vaginal health and bone health, and you do not want to put your breast glandular cells at risk for mitosis and proliferation. So clinical is not enough.
Let me just interject this, and then I guess we can move on to our next question because it's fascinating to me. In your book, Happy Healthy Hormones, I think it's like page 326 and 327, you have 2 pages that explain, too high, too little estrogen. Progesterone, too high, too little, meaning symptoms of what you're going to be feeling, chances are, and also testosterone. And so for anybody who's getting Happy Healthy Hormones, you can download it here. Take a look at those pages, and it's going to help you. I believe fully, it certainly helped me to understand, oh, I might be too high or I might be too low. I want to be in between. And it was some tweaking here and there, but guess what? Got there, and then still have to tweak a little, and that's the way it goes. But yeah, you can find that there, you guys. I'm going to welcome our Facebook user, and also hi Diane and hi Lean. Get to you in a sec. Okay, question number 2.
And you just brought up an additional point worth mentioning.
Okay.
The same parameters exist for testosterone and progesterone, not too much, not too little. And so just know that's going to be evaluated as well. And we know what the zones are for young women. We certainly don't want to give a woman more testosterone than a young woman would ordinarily have. So that's all clearly defined on the 24-hour urine hormone testing.
Right. And we know how you feel about the 24-hour urine testing. We do indeed. You like it. You love it. And
yes, I do. There's no way I would be here on this very day were it not for 24-hour urine hormone testing.
And many of us might not be either, believe it or not, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. Hi, Ginny. Okay, so question number 2. Can Dr. R please explain which hormone is better for osteoporosis, sarcopenia as well? Is it estrogen or is it progesterone or is it both? I am not taking progesterone as it simply does not agree with me. We've heard this before. But this is disconcerting as I definitely want to be sure to protect my body.
Good question. Let's take the bones first.
Okay, dumb bones?
Yeah. All hormones relate to bones. Almost every hormone you can name affect bones. The top of the list for a woman is the estrogens. And you want to get that estrogen level right. And of course, this is a perfect follow-up from the first question. We know what that number is We know how much estrogen you need to protect your bones. It doesn't mean we still monitor the bones. We get an initial bone density, see where you're at. We treat you, and then we make sure that you are still maintaining bone and not losing bone. Now, there's other moving parts in the bone. Progesterone is really good for the bones. It's the only hormone I know that actually stimulates the function of the osteoblasts, those cells that lay down new bone. Oh, that's important.
Yes.
And and yes, there are a certain small percentage of women who just cannot tolerate progesterone. That's a subject for another day. There's many things that can be tried in the women who initially don't tolerate progesterone. Testosterone is important for bones. DHEA is important for bones. Thyroid's important for bones. Bones are in constant turnover. So you need to be constantly supplying raw materials that bones are made out of, which is protein and minerals. So you've got to have that protein and minerals in your diet. And you have to be able to digest and assimilate those protein and minerals. That's an issue for midlife. By midlife, most of us have no longer have the digestive power that we had when we were 20. So very often it calls for supplementation of hydrochloric acid in the form of betaine hydrochloride, because it takes that to really do a great job with minerals and protein, and additional protein digestive enzymes with each meal. So there's also, and there's a chapter in the book on bones because there's more detail related to bones. So yes, all these hormones matter. And so there's a lot of moving parts. So if it turns out that you're a woman who cannot tolerate progesterone, an important hormone, no worries, it happens, but there's so many other things that relate to bones that you want to get those right. Now, there was a second part of that question, Carolyn. What was it?
Well, she wanted to know which hormone is better.
Well, they all matter. The answer is they all matter, plus all the other things that I said matter. So you don't want to. But the big one is estrogen.
Okay, that answers that then. The big one is estrogen.
But they all matter, so I hesitate even that I would say.
Well, I guess you've said before, I'm trying to quote you, and I apologize if I'm not doing it correctly. Like, this is not a disease. You're not broken. You know what I mean? It can be worked. Like, you could go really, really low on progesterone and slowly. And start.
There's different ways to address that progesterone intolerance.
Right. So it's not like a done deal.
Exactly. And if it is a done deal, and I have seen we couldn't resolve the progesterone issue, but just know this about progesterone. Young women have about 100 times more progesterone than they have estrogen. And if you've ever been pregnant, oh my God, it's an astronomical amount of progesterone that your body has met up with. So we really try and solve it. It is a matter of special allergy to how the progesterone is getting delivered. And in most instances, but not all, been able to solve that apparent initial intolerance to progesterone.
Yeah.
Sometimes the progesterone receptor sites, you remember this one very well. I know you do, Carolyn, that it's a common occurrence that progesterone output of the ovary declines earlier and more profoundly than estrogen decline. I mean, all of us, men and women, we're peak hormone production is about the age of 20, and we gradually decline from then on out. But progesterone can decline earlier and deeper in women. And that means the progesterone receptor sites can go to sleep, so to speak. They can go dormant early on.
Yeah.
My first approach to progesterone relates to those receptor sites is, okay, well, let's be more gentle on the uptake. Start with really low doses, gradually increase. Like, it's common for us to administer in 1 drop of our organic oils progesterone, contains almost 9 milligrams of progesterone. Heck, we'll start a woman down on 1 milligram.
Exactly.
Just by changing the concentration, or we'll start her on 1/10 of a milligram.
Right.
because we can play with the milligrams per milliliter. That's the amount of progesterone per drop.
Right.
So there's lots of, because if you overwhelm receptor sites, they don't work. And if her progesterone receptor sites have been asleep for years or decades, that can be one of the reasons why there's an apparent initial intolerance to progesterone. But even if it turns out you're totally intolerant to progesterone, there's so many other goodies in our body that are going to protect your bones.
Yes. And it's pretty
The other part, now, thank you, was the muscles.
Yes.
Now, this is really important.
Well, it is.
I think it's one of the most important things that we do. And the hormone that is tremendously important for muscles is the queen of the female androgens, testosterone. Erase from your mind that testosterone is a male hormone. It is a human hormone.
Got
and
it.
The queen of the androgens, DHEA is also an androgen, is testosterone. And every woman is losing her testosterone. And by 3 years into menopause, at least, if not right from the beginning, those testosterone levels are so low, it's going to be very harmful. And muscle is extremely dependent upon adequate testosterone levels.
Yeah.
If you go to, I lived for years in Florida, and I used to go to the beach frequently. And number one, you don't see a lot of older people walking on the beach.
Right.
And when you do, you see this incredible phenomena of very thin lower extremities, very thin thighs and calves. They've lost muscle. Or many women right now do the muscle flab test by flapping your triceps. Because that used to be muscle, and it used to be the triceps muscle. And it's one of the places, of many places, where it shows up in women. The loss of muscle has been known forever. And in medical school, we had a special lecture on it from a gerontologist who told us, here's what's happening in older people. They're losing their muscle through a process that's named sarcopenia, for what that's worth. And that's why elderly folks, so many, high percentage, ultimately wind up with canes, then walkers, then wheelchairs. And that transition can be the moment where someone can no longer be taken care of at home.
Right.
And then also, when you get sarcopenia of the muscle that holds up the bladder and the uterus, you get into losing your urine along with vaginal atrophy, which compounds that, and you get into adult diapers. And that's another place where people lose control of their ability to take care of themselves, and they move into assisted living facilities. Testosterone replenishment and getting it right is one of the most important things that a woman's going to do. Because I can tell you, as I mentioned several times on this program, that an 80-year-old woman and a 90-year-old woman, their life is as important to them as our lives are to us in this very moment. And they are strong, and they will muscle up, and they will make that transition into the assisted living facility, but it's heart-wrenching. And they want to stay at home, and they want to be able to get down on the floor and play with their great-grandchildren or whatever they're doing. They want to continue to contribute in life. And, so much of their ability to be as alive and well as they want depends on ovarian hormone replenishment. I'm talking estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, and progesterone. Whole life, there was a crazy myth that you should only take it for a small amount of time. That's a whole other story. You want to take this stuff for your whole life, just like men. They're losing their testosterone, and they're finding their testosterone by the millions.
Yes.
They're getting it.
Yes.
And they need it just as desperately as we all do. Oh, here's my testosterone. Thank goodness I have it.
So do I. It's the weirdest thing.
Same purple bottle, different strength.
Yep.
We need a little more testosterone than you do.
Yeah.
So muscle loss, so crucial. It's you don't have to know all this information, though. There's only two things you need to know. Number one, you want to get on the right doses of hormone for your whole life, and you want them to be really great. You want the initial hormone determining process and the follow-up year upon year process to be excellent. You want the very best that's out there.
Yes.
And the second thing is your job is to really go shopping for someone who is specializing in this and really knows what's doing. And
Absolutely.
a plug for us, I mean, you become a member of the Menopause Method, you will get this exactly what I'm mentioning here.
Oh, what a difference it makes. Oh, what a difference it makes. And oh, what a difference it makes to feel well. And I, see women daily, not in a practice, but I'm around women daily, and they're in their 50s wearing adult diapers, Dr. Rosenzweig.
Oh my God, Carolyn, I did not know that.
It's the honest to God's truth. And they're having a hard time walking up the steps.
Yes, they are. Remedy as early as you can and whenever you can. And even if you're having a hard time walking up the steps and you've taken some losses, you can do some regaining. So if now is the moment, get it right now. I've seen women retain muscle strength. I saw a woman who couldn't walk without a walker, my mother-in-law.
Right.
She was 86, and she fell and fractured her hip and her humerus and her pelvis. And after 3 months of rehab, we put her on these hormones. And we have a photo of her, a video of her sitting on a low couch with her arms outstretched after 3 months of treatment, standing up without using her hands. It's absolutely miraculous.
Amazing. Yeah, it's got to be an incredible feeling.
Get on them hormones.
Yeah.
Them bones and them muscles is dependent upon them hormones.
Yeah, maybe that could be a new song, because I remember the old song, Dim Bones, Dim Bones, Dim. You remember that? Just add some hormones in there, make a new song. Hi, Rachel, and hi, Sarah. And I'm seeing these come up. I'm going to ask another question. Geez Louise, Dr. R, this is a big question. Should we answer some of the other questions first? What do you think?
Choose, Carolyn. You're the captain.
I'm the captain. Okie dokie. Well, really quickly, I just want to say, one of the women were talking about SHBG, and the other woman said, "Well, I can give you some of mine, and then we'll be even." There's a question: what's a good level of testosterone for women? That's sort of back to those optimal level questions we were talking about at the beginning, correct?
Yes, and it's at the lower end of youthful, and some women need a little more and a little less. So we define this very clearly on the 24-hour urine hormone test. There's a optimal zone published there, and that's a technical thing that I could explain.
Right.
You want to get some decent testosterone levels. Absolutely.
It's made a huge difference in my life. And I had a hard time tolerating it at first because it was too high and I didn't understand. And then I got it right. And it has made an incredible difference. I get up those stairs now. And it's nice. Okay, so I'm getting into this big question. And yeah, okay. Let me just say this. Rachel is saying she was 30 when she had a radical hysterectomy. She was 44 when she had a double hip replacement due to her hips deteriorating. She says she has a lot of arthritis now. She's on estradiol and testosterone by implants. That's interesting. I haven't heard of implants. It's an interesting thing. So just in lieu of what we're talking about, personally, and I am not a doctor, but I would think that supplementing with these hormones is a good thing, right?
Well, a radical hysterectomy, that is including the removal of the ovaries. That means she went 14 years without hormones of any kind.
And I went 17.
That's how you get the osteoporosis. And so getting the, thank you so much.
Anyway, well, I went 17 years without any hormones. It was a nightmare.
So it's not too late to start the hormones. I'm not a fan of implants. But if that's what you have and that's what you can get, enjoy them and celebrate them. Just make sure those levels are good, adequate, and there's a lot of ways to determine that. But good for you for getting on estradiol and testosterone.
Absolutely.
That's a good start. And you also want to be on progesterone and DHEA. And there are other ways to do this than implants. But hey, bravo, you got some hormones in you right now. That's
exactly. And this is why I brought this question up. And then again, my cursor. So I'm going to get into this big one. I think it's a big one, and I think it's an interesting one. And I don't think we've done enough due diligence, and I feel badly. So to the male species, that's another part of this planet. We so often talk about women, women, women. And in our last interview, FaceTime, I was talking to you, and I was trying to give you a compliment, but we went somewhere else. I said, you haven't gone through menopause, Dr. Rosensweet, wanting to say, but you have so much knowledge for us women. And you stopped me and you said, oh, yes, I have. And I said, well, that's called andropause. And you said, yes, it is. So I thought, all right, we got to get into this a little bit because it's a very interesting thing. Men do go through a menopause. It is called andropause. And this is my own question, and it's a heady subject, yes, but just to start, I'm wondering, do men suffer similar symptoms like women do? I mean, do they need estrogen and progesterone the way that we do? I know they need testosterone. There are a lot of questions about this. Do they get hot flashes? Do they get upset? Do they get moody? Do they, what's going on with men in this world?
Well, there's an identical thing going on with men and women.
Interesting.
Yeah, and here's what it is. Our hormone levels peak at the age of 20 and start to decline throughout our life. Women have this one special moment when the ovaries really stop. I'm trying to figure this out backwards again. The ovaries really stop. So that's a big drop off there, but they continue to decline too. Men have a steady decline, same decline towards zero. Some men, the decline is much worse than others. And since the principal gonadal hormone in men is testosterone, whereas women have three major hormones: the estrogens, progesterone, and testosterone. Men have one, testosterone. Right. Now, interestingly enough, men need a certain amount of estrogen. We also have estrogen. When we test, we have estrogen. And the men who have too little estrogen, well, remember when I said that estrogen is so protective to the arteries of women?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Well, a certain amount of estrogen is needed by men to protect our arteries.
Yes.
And when you hear of a young man, never sick a day in his life, had a heart attack in the age of 40, very often when you test those men, they're very rarely tested, they have low estrogens, too low. They don't have enough. Now, I have a colleague who has actually written up a case where a young man had a heart attack and his estrogens were too low. Now, this is a frontier, are men being dealt with this precision, but I just heard a lecture by an expert in men recently who said, you watch that estrogen level in men and you make sure that they're in a decent zone. So because of the way steroid hormones are produced in the body biochemically, men have testosterone, we have DHEA, we have estrogens. And so, but the one that we pay primary attention to in men is that testosterone.
Right.
And yeah, you don't hear about it, but there are symptoms. For one thing, men get sarcopenia. Take a look at their thighs and their calves. But the screamer, the elephant in a men's world, is the loss of erectile function and sexual libido.
Right.
Now, we didn't hear much about what was going on with men for decades and decades and decades. But I'll tell you, there were men who were getting testosterone injections from their doctor's office for decades and decades. I remember in New Mexico when I lived in practice in Santa Fe, a New Mexican from northern New Mexico, his doctor had retired. He had been getting, he was in his 70s. He had been getting testosterone shots for decades from his doctor who just retired. He wanted me to give him shots. So it was going on behind the scenes. Now, what do you know? I don't know what year Viagra or Cialis came on the market, but they had an explosion of popularity. And what they do is they enhance erectile function. They're not hormones, but they do enhance erectile function. And a man who is having erectile problems, can't get an erection or has a weak erection, can take Cialis and Viagra or similar medications. And by God, a great number of those men, they get their erection back. Well,
yeah, sometimes they last for a really long time. I've seen that in the ER.
When those two drugs came on the market, oh my God, there was an explosion of popularity. And the thing that was so interesting to me was, look at the men who came out of the closet. Look up the sales of those two erectile enhancers, and you're going to be, so it ain't just happening in women. It's happening in men as well. And so I have colleagues that have devoted their careers to assisting men in getting it right. And there's moving parts. In men, it's testosterone. It's how you're going to administer it. What are your sex hormone binding globulin levels, SHBG levels? Some men need other things. They also need the Cialis or the Viagra. So there's a lot of different moving parts. Some men get HCG for preserving the testicles. So there's lots of moving parts. I
see the little skinny legs too.
You bet they've lost muscle strength and
sarcopenia.
Sarcopenia, the same sarcopenia that occurs in women occurs in men. And so there's an exact equivalent. But do men get hot flashes? No, these are more estrogen dependent things. Men, although I have heard of men complain of hot flashes, but they do get grouchy and they do get weak and they get congestive heart failure because the heart's a muscle and it weakens if it gets sarcopenia too, and they get a lot of mood issues. And they lose their drive, they lose their oomph. So there's plenty of lost testosterone symptoms. So women, you are not in this alone. Men are undergoing as dramatic, as substantial declines as women are. And
our Facebook user says, I'm so glad that we're talking about the men too. And I agree. For so long, it's been such a hush, taboo, don't talk about this. My grandmother's day, but I think it's really important to include men in our menopause, and I think it's important for men to include us in their andropause. And if we're going through it at the same time, forget it. It's like a perfect storm for a possible disaster unless we communicate about it. I mean, that's my own feeling, who do they go to see Dr. Rosensweet, these men that feel like they may be entering andropause, if they even know what andropause is?
One thing you can do is there's a couple websites of doctors, and quite a few of them will have taken on treating men. And here's one of them. Look up A4M.
Yeah.
It's the letter A, it's the numeral 4, and it's the letter M. They are one of the largest training and continuing education organizations, and they list their own doctors. So if you type in your zip code, you're going to pull up the doctors in your area. And the profile of the doctors in your area, they're going to say whether they're treating men and women with hormones. Another one of those is ACAM. ACAM. Another one is AMMG. And there's a lot of urologists who are not treating necessarily with bioidenticals, but they are treating with injections and stuff. And there is a male testosterone approved by the FDA. It's called Androgel. And I think urologists are the home of the use of Androgel. These other doctors are going to be using compounded bioidentical hormones. And I'm a big fan of those, of course. And so there's 3 resources. Plus,
thank you.
Plus shop around, call urologists. If insurance is critical for you, call your urologist and just ask, are you treating with testosterone? Just ask the front desk. Does your doctor prescribe testosterone itself? Do you use Androgel? Of what's offered commercially by manufacturers, daily application of Androgel would be far my preference. And injections work, and they've been working for 50, 80 years. God, they've been around for a long time. And there's other methods of delivery that I'm not going to mention because I'm not a fan of them.
Yeah, bro, I'm going to shut my mouth.
You wondered why it wasn't coming out.
Yes.
ACAM, A4M, AMMG. You type in your zip code, you're going to get a lot of information.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for that. I think it's really important because, again, as I'm telling you about the women that I'm seeing, I also see men.
And also our menopause method, as we speak, we're implementing a training program for men for our physicians and nurse practitioners. And we've already trained one in men.
Very nice.
One of our people. And we're now expanding the program so that all of our providers are very skilled at treating men as well. So you can have a one-stop shop.
I mean, they'll be able to use the oils?
Some men will. Some men require larger doses, and there'll be other delivery forms.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And you know what that speaks to, Carolyn? That's a really excellent point to bring up. Men's testosterone level can be so disastrously low that you just can't get it done with topical.
Yeah, got it.
So don't think that women are the only ones who are falling off of a cliff as far as hormone levels go. Men are too. And we can't even use topical at a certain point. We've got to turn to injections, something like that.
Yeah, and we've got some groups out there. They're fabulous. They're on the Facebook forums too. Nelson Virgil.
Yes, mention Nelson's. Would you mention his Facebook? Do you know his actual Facebook page? Because Nelson is a wonderful, wonderful human being, and he's a major advocate. And he has a website for men.
Facebook user says this is the episode for a public relations campaign. Yeah, it is. And
well, it is. I mean, public relations, or you got to get to the actual folks. This isn't about theory. You can ask all the questions you want, but what it's going to come down to is you got to have the phone numbers.
Yes.
You got to make the appointments with someone who really knows what they're doing. So
operative words with someone who really knows what they're doing. That's so important. Oh my God, it's so important. But yes,
do you know Nelson's?
I do. It's the Women's Health and HRT group on Facebook. It's very easily findable. Women's Health and HRT. Just put that into the.
What about his man's group?
I don't have that up. I have it on my other computer, but I certainly can put it on the ins and outs of menopause.
Get his man's Facebook. He's a wonderful resource, and he's an amazing human being.
Yes, he is, and I've known him a good 3 years or so now too, like you. And he does have a whole thing for men, and I think it's Excel EXCEL something, but I'll find it out and I'll put it up on the Ins and Outs of Menopause page, because we are always speaking about women. We matter, of course. And thank you, Dr. Rosensweet, for giving all you do to us women. It's amazing the amount of knowledge that you have, and your incredible ability to teach. It's a gift. But men too are very important, and I don't know that they know, some of what they need to know, in the same way that we women kind of don't know what we need to know. It's a together, kind of thing. So, I mean, you don't often see like men's groups saying, "Oh, there can't be any women here," but you see a lot of women's groups saying, "No men allowed." And I for me, I think that communication is really important, especially if you're man and wife. If you're not talking to each other and you're both experiencing this, oopsie, that's not going to be a really good, time of it, for sure. So maybe we can get to some of our questions, because I only put these 3 down for today. I'm looking here. And this again goes back to something we talk about probably almost every single interview. It's a question that comes up all the time. Progesterone after radical hysterectomy. I was told I don't need them. And this is often what is told to women.
And I totally disagree.
I know that. And
I knew you knew that. I understand the origins of why that was said, because one of the better known actual metabolic effects of progesterone is to balance estrogen and thus balance the formation of the uterine lining. So if a woman goes into menopause and she has too much estrogen and not enough progesterone, she's going to develop an endometrial lining and she's going to bleed. Spot, bleed, menstruate. But when you have adequate progesterone in a woman who has a uterus when she's in menopause, that it's going to support the health and the proper thickness and the non-bleeding of the uterine lining called the endometrium. So because that was one of the more popularly known functions of progesterone, when women had their uterus removed, there was this thought, incorrect, that, well, they don't need progesterone because there is no uterine lining.
Right.
Like every hormone, you name them, they all got multitude of effects all over our body. There's receptor sites for these hormones in almost every cell in our body. So let's talk about the other things that progesterone does.
Okay.
It's the big calmer, which means if I selected the proper dose of progesterone and I injected into you, Carolyn Shapiro, or me, David Rosensweet, or anyone that's on our chat, and I got the dose right and I injected it intravenously, we could be put to sleep so deep that surgery could be performed on us.
That's crazy.
That's how strong that is as a calmer. All the rest of the hormones that you can name, with the possible exception of melatonin, they're animators. They're fight or flight things, not progesterone. It is the calmer. Thus, when women don't have enough progesterone, instead of being calm, they get anti-calm, known otherwise as anxiety or nervous or freaked out.
Freaked out. Freaked out.
Not enough progesterone, get nervous, get anxiety. And so many women in the perimenopause are developing this anxiety out of the blue. They're leading good lives. They have the common stresses of life, but they're starting to get anxious and nervous.
And you can't get out the front door.
I'll tell you something. If that starts to happen to you, even if it's subtle, you need progesterone most likely. That's the first go-to thing. Of course, there's other causes, my God, of anxiety and nervousness.
Well, yes.
But it's so common in the 30s for a woman to start getting anxiety over life circumstances that wouldn't give her anxiety. So you want to check into your progesterone levels. And you want to learn about progesterone at that time. Progesterone is the big calmer. So when women lose progesterone, they can't sleep right. Oh, God, they start getting a certain type of sleep disturbance. And progesterone can really be magical in helping them restore sleep. I mean, all of us know that all you got to do is miss a couple nights sleep. What's life like under those circumstances? So progesterone can be one of those very crucial things to take, so to help you with sleep. Now, there are other crucial things related to sleep, including estrogen. So I'm just not going to put progesterone as the solo cause of sleep disturbance. No way. Progesterone, like I was mentioning just earlier today, is the only biochemical that I know that supports osteoblasts to lay down new bone. Thus, progesterone is also very important in bone health. So there's three powerful reasons that if you, and this is what I want to say, if you have a hysterectomy with removal of the ovaries, you want to find someone who's going to get you on the right dose of progesterone. Oh, by the way, estrogen plus testosterone plus DHEA, all of them, including progesterone. Take progesterone. If you're going into menopause and you've lost your period, you need progesterone, whether you have a uterus or not. You need progesterone.
You know, I could go on and on about that one, and I'll get a little bit angry if I do, so I'm not going to go there. But I will say that two things that I often hear. I'm taking progesterone and it's giving me horrible anxiety, so I can't take it. It's weird.
Let's start there. Some women, and I don't have the exact reason for it, but there's a certain percentage of women at first blush, they don't tolerate progesterone or they get paradoxical effects. Yet, I say due diligence. There's techniques for discovering whether you do tolerate and can get into proper dosages of progesterone as well.
Right. And you feel it.
Yeah. So don't abandon progesterone. Yes, these they're unusual, but they do happen in response to progesterone. My belief has been, because I was mentioning earlier of the early decline of progesterone, the receptor sites go asleep earlier than they do for estrogen and other hormones. Right. So I believe that's one of the reasons why women have trouble with progesterone initially. But don't let that stop you. Get with someone who really knows what they're doing. I won't give a commercial plug, or will I? No, I won't. Get with someone who knows what they're doing and knows how to do the various processes to see if sooner or later you can tolerate progesterone. And if you can't, ultimately you can't, there's so many other important moving parts to living and being healthy. Don't worry about it. But
the thing is,
do the due diligence to see if you can tolerate ultimately progesterone.
Yeah, I did do the due diligence, and I'm so glad I did. Oh my God, I'm so glad I did. So it brings me back to, again, what we talk about so often is what you're just saying, find someone who really specializes in menopause and who knows hormones inside out and knows knows how to dose correctly with, because you can't go to a doctor and busy practice, whatever, running around, you have 15 minutes, like, no, you don't have a uterus. No, you don't need progesterone. Don't even trip. Well, that's not 100% correct, right?
Carolyn, I wonder if we want to deal with this questions that have been popping up today around SHBG.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My only problem is without my cursor, and I apologize, I cannot see them.
I can read it. I can read about it. And I'm going to talk about SHBG in general.
Which is the sex hormone binding globulin. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's a normal body plasma protein. It's in your blood. And the interesting thing about hormones that we're talking about, the ovarian hormones and also other hormones, is they are not water soluble. That means when the ovary produces them, they can't just float around as oil droplets in your blood.
Yeah.
They won't.
Right.
They have a very special, anything that's fat soluble needs to be transported and carried. And the body that is so extraordinary, is mind-boggling, produces these plasma proteins that when the ovary produces the hormone, they link onto these plasma proteins, and that's how they're transported around the blood.
They're carriers.
They're carriers. And sex hormone binding globulin is one of the main carriers for the ovarian hormones.
Okay.
And so it's a natural function, and it's needed. There's other carriers. There's albumin. There's other globulins that will carry ovarian hormones, but the main one is sex hormone binding globulin. Now, if a young woman who's at the peak of her hormone production happens to get extra hormones, the body has a protective mechanism. The most common extra hormone they get is estradiol, extra estrogen in the birth control pill. So here she is, she's at the highest level she'll ever have in her whole life of hormone production, and she's getting added estradiol from the birth control pill. Well, the body reads that as too much estrogen, more than what we need. Let's protect her from excessive estrogen levels. Let's bind up the extra. So her body will produce extra sex hormone binding globulin to bind up the extra estradiol.
That's pretty fascinating. Okay.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But there's problems associated with that.
Right.
Other ovarian hormones bind to sex hormone binding globulin as well. So it also binds up some testosterone. And if you interview young women who are on the birth control pill, a certain percentage of them are going to say, I lost my libido when I started the pill, because they lost their testosterone in the robust levels needed. So sex hormone binding globulin is tricky. And
yeah.
It's tricky enough that we, prior to administering hormones or at the beginning of a woman's hormone program, we get a blood draw for sex hormone binding globulin. We want to be sure it's in normal range, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes a woman who goes on the birth control pill gets an elevated sex hormone binding globulin, she stops the birth control pill, and you'd think that it would come back down to normal, and it does in many instances, but not in all instances.
Right.
Some women are entering menopause with an elevated sex hormone binding globulin, and sometimes we need to do something about it.
Well, that's going to lead me into a question that I'm seeing. How does one lower her sex hormone binding?
And I keep searching for a way to do it naturally, and we've tried various things, and I don't know how to do it naturally. We use a pharmaceutical medication called danazol, and that's a whole story.
Right.
And it works, yet it's not without its potential problems.
Right.
So you want someone who's really expert and really knows how to test you for those potential problems. And then the final question I can answer today, because I've got another hard stop at 11. That will be the new ritual.
That's up. Bam. Gotta go.
Does he know about low SHBG and injecting testosterone every other day? I know it's common to inject hormones or take hormones every other day. I'm not a fan of it, because in order to do that, you got to produce 2 days of injection. So you're going to produce this initial high peak in the blood, higher than the body's used to seeing, as opposed to whether you injected once a day or twice a day.
Right.
And so this is a big deal. And yet clinically, I know it's possible to get away with it, but it's not optimal. And if I were to recommend injecting testosterone, I would do injecting daily, so you don't get an artificial higher elevation than you ordinarily would, because you're trying to cover 2 days.
Right.
Because that puts you and robust.
I lost you.
Problem. But we always keep our eye on it, especially when we're administering hormones. So it's part of our annual follow-up. And oh my God, my time for today has come to completion. Sex hormone binding globulin matters, and we can talk about it at another time. And I'd like to say thank you once again, Carolyn Shapiro. What a fun time I have with you and all of the people who join us for this. And so until next time, which is next Tuesday, hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista, baby. All right, so everybody, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to put Nelson's stuff up there, and Dr. Rosensweet, you're a little frozen there, but sort of there. I don't know. Thank you so much. Have a great, safe, happy, healthy weekend, and we will talk again on Tuesday, all. See ya.